Snyder.
Chapter 9. Start Over. Matthew Simmons, Virginia, 2018. A cold sweat slid down the back of my neck as I sat on a bus, traveling along a forlorn highway in the middle of the night. Everyone else was asleep, their heads all leaning to the side, resting on one another's shoulders or using the wide windows of the bus for a pillow. The man seated beside me snored against the glass, and I gripped my armrests, watching the ceiling as the passing streetlights painted it orange and black. I couldn't sleep again. Didn't know exactly how many hours it had been since I left the base, but I knew I couldn't stand another minute waiting for a verdict. Putting up with cold stares and gossipy bullshit from every rank, color, and creed. Twiddling my thumbs like some kind of criminal, hoping for the best out of something that all I wanted to do was forget. But it wasn't until my brother called, inadvertently reminding me of the last time I'd run away from home, that I decided I couldn't wait 1 minute longer. I didn't buy the ticket to reach a destination. The first bus leaving the station was more than good enough. As I glanced out the window, catching eye of the lights of a nearby town, my mind returned to the offer my brother had made me of going home. That he'd managed to forgive me, even after all these years, was surprising enough. But the fact that he'd actually offered me a chance to see him face to face again, to live in his home with his wife and children, was something I couldn't believe. I wondered if he was terminally ill. I wondered if something had happened in his life that suddenly made him think of me as a priority. But mostly I wondered that if I did decide to take him up on his offer, whether or not I'd be able to control myself if I ever saw him again. If I ever saw Anna with him again. The last time I'd spoken to Seb was during the summer almost 4 years ago. First time in nearly a decade. Just picked up the phone and called me out of the blue one day. Only this time it wasn't because Dad had died. It wasn't because of some legal matter or family obligation. It was because he wanted to try and talk to me. That was the really shocking part of it. As far as I was concerned, I was as dead to my brother as he was to me. And learning from him, of all people, that that wasn't the case was just too much to handle. I hung up the phone. When he called back again and again, I just kept hanging up. Eventually, he got the idea. I breathed uneasily, feeling like I was somewhere else. My mind rolled around, jumping from happy memories of growing up on the farm to the bitter realization that I could never go back. I wondered if, after I left, my parents kept my room the way it was, or if they tried to hide it. Maybe they tore down my posters and burned my things while my brother still lay in the hospital bed, barely breathing. I wondered if they ever forgave me, or if they went to their graves with what I'd done. My father was always too stubborn, and my mother was too strict. They're probably happy I ran away. Saved them the pain of looking me in the eye to tell me they didn't love me anymore. Because at the time, I wasn't sorry. At the time, I thought I'd killed my brother. I remembered my first day on the road after leaving home. I slept beside the highway, refusing to hitchhike until I got far enough from town that no one would recognize me. I used the backpack of supplies I'd thrown together on my way out of the house as a pillow. But I couldn't sleep. I listened to the crickets chatter as I watched passing headlights, expecting each one to be someone come to take me away, lock me up, give me what I deserved. But when I set out the next day, and the next, getting farther and farther away, I realized that I wasn't in any trouble. I wasn't on the run. I was forgotten. I managed to find odd jobs in different towns, never settling down or getting too comfortable. The idea of leading a normal life didn't appeal to me anymore. I had my shot at that and I missed. But after a few years of wandering, I began to need more than another destination. So I decided to grant myself the privilege of serving my country, fulfilling an old dream of mine and moving on with my life. But the military was a hard place to call home. And now, I didn't even have that anymore. Now I was back on the run, and despite the familiar sensations of guilt and regret, deep down I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong. Just like old times. Because the truth was, when I fled home years before, I felt like a man for standing up to my brother, for putting him in his place. I was thinking of everyone else that made me feel I'd done something wrong. And since that day, I've made a point of keeping a distance from everyone else. The bus eased to a stop in the back lot of a rest station. Neon lights hung from the sides of the building, showing spots of litter wedged into the cracked concrete. I released my grip of the armrest and stood up as the bus's lights turned on and the doors opened. A couple of passengers waddled off to use the bathroom before they'd head back out onto the road. I moved slowly behind them, stepping out into the cool night air. I slung my bag over my shoulder and looked out onto the neighboring small town, a patch of light between dense forest and endless roads. This place seemed as good as any from the map I'd looked at. Even reminded me of home, before I ruined the memory. The bus driver stepped off behind everyone else and stretched his arms to the side, nodding politely to me as our eyes met. He pulled a cigarette out of his breast pocket and slid it into his mouth, taking a few steps away from the bus in my direction. "I tell you, people weren't made to squeeze in those things," he exclaimed, glancing back at the bus. "Like sardines in a can," he chuckled, taking any opportunity to talk to anybody. I hesitated from walking away, eyeballing his pack of cigarettes. He finished lighting his own and held the pack out for me. I nodded politely and took one. "Where are we?" I asked, using his lighter and handing it back to him. "Ephesus, or as I like to call it, an indoor toilet on the way to someplace better." "Is there something wrong with this place?" "Nah, I was just kidding. Don't think there's anything wrong with it. As far as I know, it's just an easier place to get groceries than driving to the next town. Ain't much more to it than the few buildings you see. At least that's what a few folks from here told me when they hopped on the bus a few months back." "Does it get a lot of people coming and going?" I asked, taking a short puff of my cigarette and rolling my tongue around my mouth to get used to the taste. I didn't smoke. "Mostly just people passing through. Where are you headed?" "Sightseeing," I stated, thinking of a story I could feed him in case anybody asked about me. "Taking pictures of old houses and churches from all over the country." "That's so. What for, if you don't mind my asking?" "A catalog," I explained, accustomed to lying on my feet. "Say, you wouldn't happen to know when the next bus comes through here, would you?" Not sure. This time of night doesn't see much traffic. Next one probably won't come by till morning or later." "Know if there's an inn around?" "There's one a couple miles down the road," he said, pointing past a few distant houses to a flicker of light. "You thinking of extending your stay then?" "Till tomorrow anyway," I replied, dropping my cigarette and stepping on it. "I got places to be, but I'm in no rush to get there." "Well, suit yourself. I can drop you by the inn on my way past if you like." "No," I answered, already scouring the tree line for a different direction than the one I'd told him I would travel down. "I prefer to walk, sightseeing and all." "Fair enough." "Thanks for the cigarette. You have a good trip," I finished, shaking his hand and turning my back. I walked quickly down the road he'd pointed me towards, glancing out of the corner of my eye to see if he was watching me. The bus driver finished his cigarette and headed into the rest stop, and, just as he did, I turned away from the road and made my way towards the forest. Because despite what I'd told him, I knew exactly where I was and where the town would lead anyone who might try to catch up to me. Over the next few days, I'd cover my tracks. Then, once I knew I'd made my escape, I could start my life over again.